Hello and welcome to everyone who's tuning in here at AWS On Air, again, the official live track at reInvent 2020. I am joined today for a very special session. Dean Phillips and I, again, Dean being Worldwide Tech Leader of Automotive here at AWS, we're going to be talking a little bit about a year in review for the automotive segment. Dean, we've got a lot to talk about, but first of all, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Nick. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So we caught up a little before this, and we talked about some of the things that we'll get into today. We want to talk a little bit about automotive trends in the industry. There were some exciting new key partnerships in the automotive space, some announcements in the service for AWS services, always in reInvent season. And a little bit about sort of broad connectivity between AWS services and how AWS helps to serve the automotive space. So we've got 30 minutes. I've got a lot of questions, and hopefully you've got a lot of answers. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds great. Let's go.
Wonderful. Well, let's go right down that laundry list, just like I in the order that I mentioned. So for anyone who has seen the keynotes, there are very few strangers there to some of those automotive brands that we noticed. I remember myself seeing the likes of Toyota, BMW, and beyond. Which ones stand out to you, and what can you tell the viewers at home about these partnerships?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of fantastic relationships, new partnerships we've developed this year and announced. I'll just start off with the recent announcement in our partnership with Toyota. You may know that Toyota announced their partnership with us around their mobility services platform, also around a lot of the work that they're doing to enable their transformation into CASE. In automotive, we talk about CASE as connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. And what we're trying to do is just enable Toyota with our cloud platform with the largest catalog of services and capabilities that will bring this transformation to their business. And so I guess first off, you think about their mobility services platform. One of the big things there is bringing all their connected vehicles into the AWS platform. And one of the things that they did was describe their Toyota Connected Data Lake that kind of serves that services platform. And there's a number of things that they can do with that. A lot of the information that comes from the vehicle is extremely valuable. So they want to be able to, avoid maintenance events for customers, let them know when issues arise. One of the examples we described in one of the sessions that they did just this past week was to detect micro collisions. So if you think about it, you think of a fleet of vehicles in a car. Maybe you rented a car, and because they can offer this business to fleets that they have, maybe rental fleets, for example. Mm-hmm. And when somebody's driving a car in a parking lot, maybe you made like a soft bump, didn't think anything was damaged, nothing visible, but it would probably warrants an investigation. Well, a lot of times we don't have the technology enabled in the vehicles to let the fleet managers know that. So what Toyota did was using our EMR and machine learning technologies, they've been able to use the data collected from the vehicle to detect those micro collisions and then inspect them to kind of avoid big maintenance issues in the future. And yeah.
Before you go on, this case concept that you describe, I think is resonant, particularly in the automotive space, but it's been a recurring trend that we saw in manufacturing broadly and a lot of other industries where data exists, and there's been a proliferation of sensors to collect that data, especially so in the automotive space in end vehicles that people drive, right? And so, you talk to the likes of Amazon EMR, the ability to be able to have connectivity to a vehicle to both collect and push updates or collect data, but then the services that the likes of Toyota are probably leveraging to process that data on the cloud. With the move towards the digitalization or the increasing capabilities of software on these vehicles, that sounds like something it's a more broad sweeping trend that we can expect to see. in the automotive space. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of hear that throughout our conversation. When it comes to the different partnerships that we'll discuss, and then also some of the new services that were just announced this past week, and the investments we're making there.
Perfect. Well, yeah. So again, Toyota connected. I think there was. I don't know if you want to talk to any of the other ones.
Sure.
BMW. There were some other logos that I know we recognized up on the screen, but
Yeah,
you're the master of the stories here.
yeah. So I guess I'll jump to the BMW announcement. So BMW just and AWS are working together to enable their entire organization enterprise-wide to build up their skills, training up to potentially 5,000 people to BMW affiliated software engineers. BMW's always been a wonderful partner and willing to talk to the world, at our reInvent and our different tech events around the world about the success they've had with different programs. And their data hub is, most recently been their cloud data hub has been significant. And really, this program, this announcement, it was about expanding that, expanding the reach of that to, I think, over 100 different countries, where they're able to surface the financial information about all the different vehicles that they're selling and how they're configured, so they can use this data hub to kind of roll it all up centrally to do better planning around which vehicles and what configurations are appropriate for the markets that they're in. So that's just one area. Another area is looking at their autonomous or ADAS systems, excuse me. We just had a talk with Mark Nauman and Junji Tang. Mark's program or a product owner for this ADAS program, and Junji's a professional services consultant for AWS. And they talked about how BMW is using that information captured from their connected vehicles with the new ADAS capabilities to analyze it. So they land all that information up in the data lake, and then they can figure out, okay, where's the software performing really well? Where do they need to make improvements? And then they can update their machine learning models and how they run on the vehicle, and then update those over the air and improve that round trip, that loop, if you will. So that's just another area where you can imagine the scope and size of this with millions of vehicles eventually.
Certainly so. Beyond just the sheer scale in terms of number of vehicles in a fleet, you talked to BMW's global footprint, right? They they manufacture and sell and manage vehicles all around the world. The desire to be able to then push or collect data to push updates over the air, like you mentioned, becomes non-trivial at a global scale as all of that sort of over-the-air infrastructure may look quite a bit different. So I'm sure that they're making extensive use of some of the global network and infrastructure that we have here at AWS.
Well, one of the other things that's I think is going to be really transformative for them, and we'll see it kind of proliferate across the industry, is the work they're doing with EKS, our Kubernetes service, and blockchain to support what they call the part chain program. And what this does is allows them to provide traceability of critical parts and raw materials throughout their supply chain. Not only can they, understand the provenance of those parts, but they're able to actually highlight and ensure that materials are coming from socially responsible sources. And a lot of this kind of work like that using distributed ledger technologies and blockchain is done in MOBI, which is a mobility open blockchain initiative consortium that we just recently joined, and BMW had been a partner of for quite some time.
Certainly, I always love hearing these customer use cases because it really feels like I'm able to sort of learn what it looks like to use this technology at its limits to develop features that quite literally you will see in the vehicles that you're using. And I know there were some other stories that we saw mentioned there to the likes of NXP and BlackBerry Ivy. We could talk all day about these customer stories, but I'm going to take a step back and we're going to think a little bit bigger here. I certainly extrapolated some trends from those customer stories that you referenced, but what are the broader challenges that AWS has seen in the automotive space that we can talk about tie-ins for how AWS services solve them, but let's start with the lay of the land, especially for folks like myself who may not be too ingrained in the automotive sector.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the case trends is that it's required a complete re-architecture of the vehicle architecture itself. So historically, you have a number of purpose-built SoCs and sensors with firmware dedicated to that device in the vehicle. And you think about having hundreds of those scattered throughout the vehicle from multiple different suppliers with, over 100, 150 million lines of code. You think of it kind of like a data center, right? It's just, it represents the diversity that you have in a real data center. But the challenge is we can't continue to operate that way. The software needs to be changed rapidly, and what we're doing is we're kind of coming to more generalized computing architectures. We're seeing the deployment of GPUs from companies like NXP with their S32G, their new gateway, where we can deploy edge technologies like AWS Greengrass that's been kind of certified or tested to run on their gateways. And then you think about this complexity. What we want to do is make it easier to access that information in the vehicle and that software architecture and make it more updatable. So partnerships like ours with BlackBerry and their Ivory offering will enable that and make that possible. So BlackBerry will take the functional, safe, secure environment that's in the vehicle, connect to all the vehicle networks. They'll provide a normalized data layer and set of APIs that then we can build on top of for developers to access that information in a safe way. So they'll be able to access this layer by working with the OEMs to make a more updatable software environment. And we're seeing this trend across the industry with other customers in a similar way.
Certainly so. I think as a consumer, we see sort of the results of all of these changes already, and on the flip side of that coin, we see sort of the status quo leading up to a lot of these recent changes. Insofar as when you buy a vehicle, oftentimes you're sort of locked into whatever that display or that user interface may look like from the day that you buy the vehicle. But in our lives, we see technology blazing on past us. So these over-the-air updates seem to be something that can drastically improve the quality of life of you and I if we drive cars, but most importantly, our customers who are buying these, who are purchasing and using these vehicles. So that's really exciting. If I had to naively paint with a broad brush here, what I seem to be detecting is these devices, these vehicles are devices and have sensors that generate lots of data, and they've generated more and more data as time has gone on with more advanced sensors, right? And now there's this desire to detect this phenomena that we as humans can typically pick up on, right? Like a bump in the parking lot, or maybe going over a speed bump too harshly. But compute has lived in various places. It oftentimes is not always able to live on the car itself. Sometimes it should be processed in the cloud. And really what we're seeing is automakers really buying into this movement of being able to get the data in the right places using underlying infrastructure so they can focus on building features that matter to their end users, right? The end user may not care that their vehicle has data that's processed over on Kubernetes up on AWS, but what they do care about is that data can be returned very quickly or in real time in certain scenarios, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's absolutely the case. And you talk about surfacing features and capabilities quickly. One of the new services that we announced, I think it was last year, it's already been a year, was Wavelength for our 5G MEC offering. And we had a lot of build up this year to kind of build up that infrastructure and deploy the wavelength zones. And now what we're seeing is, okay, this is going to kind of change the game as far as what we can do in a vehicle or potentially off vehicle, very close to the roads, close to the vehicles, to create that low latency connection. So there are a number of different capabilities that we're looking at and that the industry is conjuring up as far as, how can we leverage that low latency connection?
Certainly so, and I remember that wavelength launch. It certainly doesn't feel like a year ago. Time flies. But one of the primary use cases that I heard about even then was the ability to empower connected vehicles, connected cities, and so to my understanding, this software updates can seem large, and now if you have to deliver those over the air, which is quite literally over a mobile or a 4G or a 5G connection, if you're basically constrained by your speed, the better the network, the better the speed, the quicker and more reliably those can be delivered. So wavelength, in a way, enabling mass adoption or implementation by some of our customers in the automotive space who may have been interested in implementing such features, but in the game of undifferentiated heavy lifting, an automaker or an automotive company may not want to be in the game of developing their own telecom infrastructure, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely going to change and be kind of an enabler for, when we get to fully autonomous vehicles. But as we're on that path, what we need to do is work with our telecom partners or our automotive partners around deploying the things like the cellular vehicle to everything, which is the kind of the cellular version, the 5G version of what we did with DSRC modems up until now for sending safety critical messages. That is basically a broadcasting from the vehicle, and the vehicle's listening to infrastructure and other vehicles to understand, where vehicles are coming, maybe around blind turns. It's also for discovering vulnerable road users, which are like workers or pedestrians. And now that we've moved to the cellular platform for that, I envision the CV to X messages for pedestrians and safety messages to be baked right into your cell phone. So things like we get Amber Alerts, we'll now be able to get alerts that says there's a 10,000 pound object coming at you at 30 miles an hour. You better get out of the way. Or more so to let the driver know that there's a passenger or a person, for example, in the crosswalk behind a building or an obstructed view. So it's letting vehicles and infrastructure know where objects are so that you can then change the path. And so this is used for collision avoidance, mostly. And that's also for traffic, coordination and providing updates into the vehicles to let them know, okay, slow down and then time these lights, for example.
Yeah, two components to it: high bandwidth, but also the extremely low latency to make a lot of these features possible, right? Because an alert that something is in your way is pretty worthless to you if you're already colliding with it, right? So very excited to see that. But here we are talking about wavelength, an impactful launch from 2020. We've had quite a few exciting launches here in 2021, or sorry, in 2020 reInvent this year. You want to walk us through some of the ones that you've picked out that could be most impactful for automotive customers?
Yeah, one of the first ones I wanted to mention was in the container space with our Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service, the distro and anywhere. Distro is available now. And what is this and how does it relate to, EKS and the cloud? Well, what distro is basically us publishing to GitHub bundles of the Kubernetes runtime with all the packaging and the security and the versioning that customers can take. And if they're the kind of customer that wants to take and manage and run that environment themselves, they can have the confidence that this is a curated stack that they can deploy. One of the advantages with that is now we can, in the automotive space, deploy a distro generated runtime in a place where we don't have an AWS region. So many of our connected vehicle customers, they have connected vehicles in places and parts of the world where we don't have an operation and may never. And this kind of gives them the ability to deploy with some consistency a runtime that also exists in the rest of the world for them, for the rest of their connected fleets. So if you think about that, you could also deploy EKS Anywhere, which comes out later this year, into maybe your on-premises environment, uh, in your own data center or some other you know, off cloud space, where um, you have a managed service that extends to that environment.
Yeah,
Again, consistency with your deployments in the cloud. And then
exactly.
you combine that with the console that gives you the visibility of all of those environments. So I think it's a differentiator. I think it's important for mobility, connected vehicles, and potentially our customers doing autonomous development.
Certainly so. Being able to deploy in the way that you want, where you want, is something that's immensely valuable to all customers, but especially automotive, especially if you're trying to get your deployments as close to where the vehicles may be as possible, or you're working with particular geographic challenges internationally, especially with some of the names that you mentioned prior. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about machine learning here.
Yeah.
The first sort of order of business is always getting your ducks in a row with being able to store it, collect the data, then store it, and bring it to where you want it processed, or at least getting it into the cloud here to figure out where you're going to process it later on. You mentioned a lot of these really exciting features like collision detection that automakers are working on. How does the machine learning feature story play in here for customers that have been watching reInvent?
Well, as I was talking earlier about, NXP, IV, BMW, you think about all of those. All of those have to do with putting um, machine learning models into vehicles. If you want to have an autonomous vehicle, you have to do that. And AWS has invested enormously in this space, obviously. So with the string of SageMaker announcements this past couple of weeks, and even 2 new instance types for training, designed to improve your training workloads and your cost optimization and price performance. Um, the Trainium runtime that we announced, that will be coming later this year. This will surface on a new EC2 instance type. And the point here is we're making a claim that we're going to hit those sweet spots on price performance, and it all comes to choice. Some customers may desire to run some of those workloads in the Habana Gaudi instance type. So we're going to see lots of choice to enable the data scientists and to use the platforms they want, and that's been a theme, obviously, with AWS and the number of services we have. Next, into the SageMaker space, I think the fact that we've now got this full IDE for data scientists, and actually, more importantly, for the developers who don't have that deep experience, SageMaker makes it easier, and it's easier to learn, it's easier to develop. So some of the cool things that came out were a data wrangler. I think that's really, really interesting. I mean, one of the biggest challenges with machine learning is getting your data in the right format so that you can get the models trained effectively to get the outcomes that you desire. And creating a balanced data set that's been curated properly will give you a much better performing model. So
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in with an example there because I talk quite a bit about machine learning and help developers get started with it. And the Lighthouse use case, in a way, for Clarify, SageMaker Clarify, again, one of the newer launches here, is an example I use when I'm trying to describe data drift or model drift. The phenomenon we're thinking about here is when you train the model, you have a set of assumptions. In this case, let's say we're trying to train a model that can detect other vehicles on the road. Well, you collect a data set of vehicles at whatever year that you're talking about, and anything prior to that. But over time, vehicle shapes change and they look a little bit different, right? And so naturally, we all look at vehicles outside and we say, oh, that's a car, that's a car. And we will continue to say that as vehicles change. But machine learning models can't automatically detect that if you're not feeding them that new data and addressing that bias. So very excited to see a purpose-built service here in SageMaker Clarify helping to tackle that exact problem. Which is certainly a little bit of a hairy one to detect, because it's not like you're going to compiler error. It's a bit more dicey in terms of trying to diagnose and fix.
and really trying to understand why the models perform the way they do and what influences the outcomes. If you think about a path planning algorithm, why did it decide to stop versus take a right turn or something around an object?
Yeah.
Oversimplifying, but you get the idea. If we can really start to uncover what is creating the outcomes, then we can potentially train and make the improvements.
Well said. Observability, machine learning, obviously immensely valuable feature. Excited to be able to deliver that. We have just a few moments left, but I wanted to ask you, lots of exciting stuff in the last year, lots of exciting launches here at reInvent 2020. What is on the horizon for customers in the automotive space? What can they look forward to?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see the connected mobility runtimes evolve as we get into more and more capable ADAS functions showing up in vehicles. So we're gonna invest in that space and create solutions and reference architectures for customers to understand how to build new edge architectures in the vehicle on platforms like NXP and others, using solutions, working with customers to define their own architectures with BlackBerry Ivy, which is a massive capability. And we have a number of other automotive suppliers we're working on similar types of solutions. So we're very excited to see that evolve over the next year, and bringing in, video and other data sources into what would traditionally a traditional telemetry solution, making these things really capable and updatable over the air.
Certainly, I know even I'm remembering a lot of the reference use cases for some of the manufacturing AI services like Monotron, look out for metrics for time series data, and Panorama being able to visually detect defects. I'd imagine that's immensely valuable for managing the supply chain of parts and detecting that earlier. You talked about preventative maintenance. It's no earlier than being able to detect it right off the supply chain, right before it ever ends up in a vehicle. So lots of exciting launches in the automotive space, and it seems like a lot of those names that we saw before and many others that might be watching this have a lot to look forward to following reInvent 2020.
Absolutely, yeah. I think anomaly detection across all of the AWS for industrial offerings that you mentioned, several of, and all the way to Amazon Lookout for metrics, where you can take that same concept of discovering baselines and uncovering anomalies, surfacing them. So for connected fleet data, for example, I think that's a great place to explore in the coming year.
Perfect. Well, again, joining me, Dean Phillips, Worldwide Tech Leader for Automotive here at AWS. Dean, it's been a pleasure. I wish we could take some more time talking, but unfortunately, the show must go on. We have other segments coming up immediately after. For any other information you'd like to learn about the automotive space here at AWS, we've got a link on screen here. That's aws.amazon.com/automotive. But that's going to do it from us here in this industry recap session for automotive. Stick around here for AWS On Air content. We've got more in just a moment. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.